All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to RantCast. This is episode 36, as we just discovered a little bit ago. I am the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar, Mr. Mephisto. Joining me tonight is once more Dr. Alex Mylonas. Say hello, Doctor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. I not to like inflate your ego way too much at the onset, like because I should like come in a little bit more dour so that I force better than you. But no, like I really enjoyed our first episode together. That was episode 19, Psychology of Sigmar. Not professional psychological information or diagnosis or anything like that, but that was a great episode. That was like the exact kind of content I'm all about. So if you guys listening in to the podcasts or watching this back on YouTube later, if you haven't seen episode 19 yet with Alex, seriously go back. That is evergreen content.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it, and I went back and listened to the episode, and I thought it went really well. And hopefully, I know I had some audio hiccups there, so hopefully that's resolved this time around, so it's just a little bit less annoying and not have as many of those to deal with.
They were fine at the beginning. They got a little like shaky at the end, and I think it was if you're doing like you're not doing a push to talk and you're doing like an audio generator, it'd be just you lean a little bit too far away from your microphone and like it doesn't pick it up anymore. It could be any number of things like that. But no, it was great content. I really liked the mapping. I really enjoyed mapping the chaos gods to like sort of basic human emotions. That was really great.
Yeah. Yeah, in retrospect, I was like, oh, that did work out really well. Yeah, good job. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Nurgle one. Well, first off, the Nurgle one was really good because I think that was like pretty resonant. But like the Slaanesh one, just joy makes you an idiot. Like immortal words. Like that now exists in forever. So that was. But yeah, so tonight we're actually gonna be doing something a little bit different. We're going to go ahead and, you are a doctor, so we're going to be applying list science. I can't think of any more appropriate guest for performing science to lists. So, you've actually prepared, a handful of lists for us. So basically 3 sort of solo 2K point lists, and then you've got your team's list with a little quirky combo or a little quirky play to it. And then,
Sorry, my wife just walked in, so I waved at her as she went by.
Hello, wifey. Strangers on the internet say hello.
Yeah, so I got a little bit of a minor reputation on Twitter by posting what I described as silly lists, and I think Brendan did a good job of describing this when you guys briefly touched on it when he said, he's not a mad scientist. He doesn't mean ill. His goals are just totally different than anyone else's. And and I think that pretty much captures it because you'll hear other people talk about like, well, how does this list work competitively or you can do that thing, but how does it work out? And I'm like, no, you went too far. Yeah. I just ask, can I do the thing?
Right. So like,
and then that's it. That's good enough.
Well, that's. I've got 2 quotes here. The first one being, "You're so busy asking yourself, like, can you do the thing? You never stop to ask why, or if you should do the thing." Right, the Jurassic Park quote. But the other thing is from what is it? Was it Unforgiven? The Clint Eastwood, one of the last westerns he ever made. I think it's Unforgiven. He's got this line at the end where he kind of snaps. And, like, he just, like, kills a bunch of people. And they're like, why did you shoot him? Like he didn't deserve that. And he just goes, deserves got nothing to do with it. Like, I just imagine you as, like, a grizzled, like, Clint Eastwoodian figure just going, competition's got nothing to do with it. So yeah, but before we dive into these lists, and my splash screen shouldn't be this one because this is the one that made me fucking laugh. I just saw the list and I just laughed instantly. I actually spit coffee. That was one of the reasons I was late starting up. But no, before we
Mission accomplished, everyone. We got a spit take. It wasn't on camera, but we got one.
Right. But no, you fools, you have all fallen for it. This is the Tzeentch episode now. Just as planned. So we're going to be talking a little bit of Tzeentch, actually up front, and then we'll get into some list science. So I guess real quick, we'll establish some credentials. Was it last year? Was when you were beginning of the years you started collecting some like basically a Beast of Chaos leaning towards the Tzeentch heavier build. Was the initial intent.
Yeah.
Going back about a year ago, could have been two. I don't know. Time is weird.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, it was maybe a little over a year ago I started collecting the army with the idea of doing more of a Zangor build. That way it could be either Beasts of Chaos or Tzeentch, depending on how I wanted to play it.
This is actually similar to like how I got it initially, was getting into Beasts of Chaos, because I was playing Nagash, so naturally I thought the thing Phantasmagoria, just having a bunch of might as well sort of make you roll those dice, unbinds available, just seemed cool. And looking at the strength of the War Scrolls going, this was before the Masters event was won by Enlightened Spam. I went, these guys are really strong, and going, these guys can really make the list work. Of course, they got strong, and I went the complete opposite direction. I went all in on on Beast of Chaos as Beast of Chaos. I didn't want to play Depraved Drove anymore after I did one playtest game with them. And I'm like, no. I'm going to be the most beast I can possibly be. So, like, I had, like, my own little journey. But yours actually landed you on Tzeentch. So you went, like... So we both stood at a crossroads with Beasts of Chaos and, like, going for Tzeentchian builds of Beasts of Chaos. And I said, fuck this, and, like, threw my map away and walked towards, and, like, heard, like, a goat screaming in the distance, and I walked that direction. And
yeah, we both stood at a disgusting goat-legged, horned crossroads, and we're like, this is odd. Why are we here? But I guess we have no choice.
Right. And so you end up actually you've been building Tzeentch for a little while now.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going into one of the teams events actually last year. You were going to bring Tzeentch to it, and then I guess take me through Tzeentch. Like, how did we get from Beast of Chaos to, like, you're the filthy whack. You're the boogeyman everyone should fear in the Midwest right now. You're on Tzeentch. Take us from there to, like, your inevitable heel turn and becoming a villain that you clearly are.
So this actually starts back when I was getting started in AoS, and Christian was recruiting me to start play the game. And I said to him, I'm interested in either Dark Elves or, Mortal Tzeentch. And he was like, oh, well, Tzeentch just got a book, and, here's their stuff. They've got their own Beastmen. And I'm like, Beastmen, Zangor, I don't know if I want to do that. So I wound up going with Dark Elves. But then always throughout the time as I was playing things, I kept looking over at Tzeentch and being like, oh, well, maybe, And then I picked up Stormcast, which delayed it another year.
See, this is where I believe at the time I met you at Dragonfall, you were on Stormcast. So.
I was, yeah, and that was actually my best tournament result was with Gavbomb when people were still figuring out how to use screens. So that ship has sailed now. But
yeah, no, everyone figured out the big thing. Like, people knew about chaff, and this harkens to a discussion I think I've been having like the last month now. We know how to use chaff right now, but we almost take for granted that, like, when Gavbomb was first showing up, and Eels to an even stronger extent, like, people knew about chaff. They didn't know the spacing. I think that was really the deployment of the spacing for optimal chaff was really the thing that everyone needed to figure out. And for the most part, I do think that people, like, figured that out now. Like, the average skill, like, the skill floor has risen on the average player in the Age of Sigmar. Everyone kind of knows roughly how to use chaff. And I think we're at one of those transitional periods right now with people learning, like, sort of objective priority and actual, like, flanking techniques and strategy.
For sure, and there's enough varied threats that you do have to be careful now. With the Gav bomb, suddenly it wasn't just your front line that was getting hit. If an evocator wound up within 3 inches of you, well, there's a boatload of mortal wounds that model is taking. So then we had to figure out spacing from that, and then eels could fly over your lines, and then that, and then you've got flesh eater courts and Slanesh and things with multiple pile-ins, and so all all that different stuff. So it's certainly been an evolving thing, but I think there's enough threats that force a screen that now people have at least learned some of the basics.
Right, right. And I think we're at the again. I think we're at one of those periods right now where that water level is rising again, and so that that floor has to be a little bit higher. But anyway, yeah. So you were best placement with Gav Bomb. Actually, there's kind of. I feel like if you ran Gav Bomb now, there'd just be a bunch of people out there like flashing peace signs and just like giving you all the respect in the world. But
right, oh, Gav Bomb! I haven't seen that in a while. That's great, man. Yeah. Meanwhile, back then it was like a fucking Gav Bomb again. Huh? All right, fine.
You play. I played while it was the thing kind of being figured out. I played it at every tournament I went to. Like I played against it. That is, and like as like my like Nagash plus 100 list, I can't lose to it. And so I just like I'd watch the frustrated Gav Bomb player just like I drop the guys, they make a 3-inch charge, and then I win, and they're just to watch their faces like be mad.
Yeah, I think that was the tournament season where there were two armies you probably had to anticipate facing. It was either a Gav Bomb or Nagash and friends.
And friends.
And whether those were, 60 skeleton friends or 60 ghost friends.
Right.
And a Vamp on Zombie Dragon. Yeah. There were a lot of games where I played against a Nagash or that Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon was like, just please die. Please die.
Nagash doesn't mind the mortals is the thing. Like he doesn't care. Like he just mortal like he's got a 4-up and a 6-up against mortal. Like he just whatever, man. Like the Rend is worse because then he doesn't have that extra 4-up. It's just the save. So like your Gav Bomb, even if you you dump your mortals onto Nagash, he's usually bouncing a handful of them back onto your very valuable elite dudes living, and then his turn's gonna roll around. He's gonna heal up a bunch. And now you're sticking your neck out. He retreats, flies over you, and you'll never catch him.
Yeah, it was so frustrating. I think there was a game I played either in a doubles match with Christian or in a singles match where I left Nagash on a single wound, and then he just, floated off somewhere else on the table, and then his army just kept coming back, and it was so close.
Yeah.
So close.
Yeah. Did you ever get Did you ever get the satisfaction of killing a Nagash when you were on Gav?
I have not. I might try to do that instead with Archaon and a Tzeentch army now. So that might be how I get revenge. I was actually considering that if I managed to do it enough, it might be fun to buy a Nagash model and then build it where he's with the Slayer of Kings sticking out of his chest. So it's Nagash at that moment when he's like, not again.
You cut me deep. You cut me real deep, man.
I know.
Not as deep as Nagash with Slayer of Kings. Boom. Sorry.
That's true. But if it's any consolation, I don't think I have ever beat Kyle's Legion of Nagash army. So, yeah. Even I actually have a really bad win rate against Kyle, actually. I think it's pretty low.
Kyle's actually a pretty skilled player. He just brings wacky lists, which we'll get to a little bit later, I think, when we're
sure,
talking
yeah.
Like 12 more gas, let's go. He's taking 10 to Holy Wars.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, the more gassed list is always a fun one. I like that one personally. I was a little disappointed, like I think he was too, that with OBR the Morghast and the Stalkers and the Immortus Guard, they're like just one wound too durable, and that actually makes them a lot less useful.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I just think the answer is dropping their points a little bit each. Like,
yeah,
like more. If Morghast went down to like 180, it'd be aggressive, but I don't think it would be like a bad thing because the trade-off is it's still 2 models. And
right, yeah.
We see this with Puscoil Blightlords. It's still 2 models. And so like they can be 360 points, that's 4 bodies. Is that like, that'll probably kill a Keeper of Secrets, but if the Keeper of Secrets activates, it'll probably kill them too. Like, it's just it's like get the charge or get your Locust to go off. No, it's just I don't know. Morghasts that's a different topic for another time.
Right,
how to
yeah.
fix Legions of Nagash and how to fix some of these like elite units that you want to see a lot more of. The various blendermen of the meta, the Bulgors, the Pusquil Blight Kings, the Morghast, all that stuff is in that same sort of heading of like elite bruiser units. In an ideal world, I would write 3.0 with them in mind, and I would actually kind of invent a new role, essentially like a scrapper or a bruiser role within the game, and then I would start to stat them out appropriately, because you have that thing where like like things that specialize in one thing and do it really well. Like if you're a really big hammer, then every problem looks like a nail, right? Like that sort of like that sort of mentality to tuning. And I think that's what you got to do with these guys is like, what's their role? Well, they just do that really, really well. So now you can have a better gauge on where to put their points and what 4s and 3s should look like for cost when it's on a handful of attacks, or 3s and 3s, whatever it ends up being.
Sure, yeah.
All right, so yeah, you have fun with Gav Bomb. Continue.
So I played Stormcast for a year, and I decided at that point I am going to dip into Tzeentch, and the Zangor seemed the route I want to take. So I start building those, and very slowly start building them, and then at some point along the way, I think either through the Honest Wargamer showing some footage or through hearing people talk about it, I learned more that like Change Host is actually still a thing. Oh, I think the GHB came out at one point along the way. Some demons got points drops, and I was like, oh, actually, Change Host seems like it would be really interesting to play around with some endless spells, to be able to have some movement shenanigans, and basically to completely get out of the combat game. Because that was when we had Flesh Eater courts, we had Plague Monks, we had Slaanesh, so there were lots of threats. Yeah. So we had lots of threats out there that made it seem really challenging to pick a fight in combat. So why not just play an army that doesn't give a shit?
Yeah, that's that same GHB. We got casino orcs too. Like that was when they paid for their wall with command points, and they ate their quartz brooch and everything like that. Even they were just like I'm all in, and they're just like gambling with their little Chuck E. Cheese dollar command points to like, just spin the slot machines and delete anything with multiple activations. Yeah, or with multiple stacking attacks. Yeah, the combat phase got like really unwieldy at the sort of like right in the momentum swing of the activation wars. If you weren't one of those combat armies, you weren't an army.
Right.
If you were trying to do combat and you weren't one of those armies, you weren't an army. Like you were just so that's kind of interesting how that like gravitated towards the endless spells build. I think it's interesting just from a general standpoint that Tzeentch just kind of like they didn't really go away. They just changed form for a little bit. It's very apt. Of course, like they changed back again now. Like so that's a lot of fun. But yeah, so like now you're doing the endless spell spam. You did end up getting your army in for that teams tournament with which one was that? That was Circle City, right?
Circle City, yeah. So I brought it to Circle City after doing just a one-dayer as kind of a test run, and I think wound up going 2 and 3 with that list. Although a couple of those were a little bit closer calls. One was against Nick True, who I think was just on, where I literally read the battle plan out to him, and then didn't do the thing that let me score the objectives. And then when I looked back at it, he was like, well, you didn't do the thing. You told me about the thing, and then you didn't do it. And I was like, you're right, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
That's so, and then he played the game perfectly with me being behind a turn. So,
yeah.
And then there was another one where I played against a Slaanesh list, which was probably not likely to be a win for me anyway. But I realized later on that I think my opponent had misread a rule, and so was getting a lot more command points than they were actually supposed to, and then getting tons of additional activations.
Right.
Which is not to excuse the fact that I'm not the best Tzeentch player. It's a complicated army, and I was fresh to it. I definitely lost of my own merits there, so that is not to throw my opponents under the bus.
Right.
But but definitely realized at that point, like, this is a pretty complicated army to play. It's going to be tough to finish my games. I'm going to have to do a lot just to like organize and keep on track with it. So then the chat is asking me how many endless spells are in the list.
How many endless spells?
I didn't put any spells through the portal intentionally. Because so the question was, how many did I put through the portal per turn? I didn't have to, because with old change host, when you swapped units, you then got to set them up within 9. So you got a free 9-inch move with your horrors at the beginning of the turn. So I don't have to put them through a portal. I'm 6 inches away from you. Here, have a pendulum.
Right. And you did you were actually on your change host at Havoc. Now Havoc is of course like it's its own animal. It's a 1K list, but you had your pendulum there, you were running a bunch of horrors. I think you had a gaunt summoner. Pretty straightforward, trimmed down version of like the change host, pre new tome, right? Like pretty trimmed down. And by that time you seem to really have your efficiency down with the list. By just watching you with your horror dice, you had your own like little system for tracking them and everything. It was a pretty clean. I played against it with my Beast's army, and Halo was on his. That was Beast Chaos Raiders versus like a pair of docks.
Yes, that was team pair of docks.
Yeah.
So it was interesting going from Stormcast to that, because the old Tzeentch army actually forced me to develop systems to track my resources. Whereas Stormcast was more straightforward. I mean, there's parts of that army that are not straightforward, but definitely with Tzeentch, I was like, I have these dice for the blue horrors, I have these dice for the brimstone horrors, I have these for fate points, I have these for battle shock and different things. So I was actually pretty happy when the new tome came out, and they basically said, don't even bother with all that. Here's how horrors split now. It's all just based on the unit. You don't have to track any of that crap anymore. And I was like, good, thank you. You probably just saved me about 15 minutes every game.
So have you gotten in many games with the new tome then, like with your army? Now that
I have.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've gotten in a few practice games, and then I went to LodgeCon, and took my host duplicitous change host list. So I've gotten in probably about 8 or 9 games with it now, and really liking it, really enjoying it. Played a few test games with Eternal Conflagration, but played them against Christian Seraphon, most of which are immune to Rend 1. And the Seraphon Tzeentch matchup is really challenging because we both had teleports.
Yep.
And he just kept summoning skinks and ripperdactyls everywhere.
Yeah.
So you could not leave a gap bigger than 9 inches anywhere on the table, otherwise skinks or horrors.
Yeah. No. Actually, we had in the Chat Gang Discord, which anyone here in Chat Gang's welcome to join sometime. Just ask one of my mods for the link. We were actually we have a lot of like Seraphon players that I think watch the show. I think it's because I'm sympathetic to their needs, but no, like they were basically having like what we used to call mental magic, is when you just like you have memorizations of like your cards and you just talk about like counters and how you play yada yada yada, and like it's a memory game that helps you remember and learn your rules. They were basically I watched them do mental magic with the Seraphon Tzeentch matchup, and it's like, you know what, this army is like oddly. Like the two of the best armies I think right now against like the boogeyman that is Tzeentch are like two of the armies that people think are the worst, which is Beasts of Chaos and Seraphon, because like I mean those two armies are the most you don't need to deal damage to win the game armies like kind of in the game, and so it's like Tzeentch is like you can do infinite damage to 10 skinks. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm just going to teleport them over here. As long as you can protect your engine, like, literally for Seraphon.
Or 4 in the case of that game.
4 engines. Yeah. You play a game. Like, you play a game. And it's not the, like... It's not the typical game of Age of Sigmar one is used to, where you push your models toward objectives and you fight, and then whoever wins the fights wins. It's like in DBZ... when like the characters are just like blinking all over the screen and there's just explosions in the background and like you can't even see the character. That's how that matchup goes. It's just like to teleport, and they're just like pew 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 pew. It's called Zui fighting, by the way, for those of you who aren't weebs. And they're just Zui fighting around the map.
Yeah, there were sticks measuring things out, 9-inch markers and sixes and threes all over the place to be like, okay, I can't move this unit off the board because it creates this exclusion zone, and then there at least will be no skinks here. But then, like, I can't move up, and then so it was. I've never killed so many things in a game and accomplished so little.
Well, see, there's that's the type of game where like I know that my brain works differently than like some others in this game. I can see one type of player being like, I hate this so much. Whereas my brain just goes, this is so awesome. Like I would think, but like I was the one who actually really enjoyed playing against my friend's Gnarl Root, old school Gnarl Root, like one drop Mega Battalion army as Nagash when he's getting like +5s to cast. And I'm like, that's like finally a worthy opponent. Like whenever that like when something challenges me or when I feel like I'm playing from the back foot or when I have to play the game backwards or sideways at different angles to like accomplish stuff, that's when I really enjoy the game. Like that's when I'm at having the most fun. Not just there's that part of the brain that gets like the quick hit button of serotonin where I'm just like, hell yeah, things got murdered. But then like the deeper enriching ones that I walk away just like laughing about are those like just weird games, you know?
There's that internal Iron Jaws player that's like, just run forward and kill the damn thing.
Right.
And then, but then there's other parts of you that appreciate other aspects to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely get that. So it was definitely interesting going from an army that had at the time probably the best defenses in the game, or one of the best defenses in the game in Stormcast, and then going to an army that's literally is asking like, we defend by putting other things on the board to stop them from hitting us.
Yeah, I mean you're playing a different game. Like you suddenly have to. I mean you're basically you're going into board control versus like combat style, and so you just have to learn a different skill set. That being said, horrors are a defensive unit. Wounds is a type of defense too. Like it doesn't matter. Like we have this conundrum in Dungeons and Dragons where it's like you can have an AC of 30 and the one natural 20 will still kill you if you have no hit points. So like the most defensive thing in the world is only as good as much damage as it can take. And it's like, well, why have the AC 30 when I can just have 10 times the hit points? Oh yeah, you're gonna hit me, but like I'm just not gonna die. And
right.
Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. That there comes a point where certain defenses are good against different types of things, but especially now, 50 wounds is 50 wounds. I will probably not roll a single 6 when you attack my unit of horrors, but you still have to do 50 wounds to them before they die.
Yeah. Right. And so you actually said something earlier on that I really enjoyed. You got some changes that when the book came out before the heat, before before the internet, before the doom and gloom, before the sky is falling. There were some changes to the book that you looked at playing the old time clock boss that was like old Change Host to this sort of new version of Tzeentch entirely. What were those changes that you looked at and you went, yes, like thank you? Because I had some moments like that going from LON to OBR where I'm like, it plays like my LON list, but with 50 guys instead of 100, and I was just like, that's all I wanted, so I had those moments. What were the moments like that for you?
So I think the change to how horrors split was a big one, and I kind of equate that to in grand strategy games. I think often players wind up falling into this trap where they think complexity equals depth, but the two are not the same thing. Sometimes things are complex and it just makes them obtuse and unwieldy, and sometimes things can be relatively simple but then have deep components to that. So I liked the fact that the horror splitting was now based around the unit, and it just all spread out from there. And so I no longer have to track this resource. I no longer have to worry about when I can actually make this split occur. Yeah, that might limit my options a little bit more in terms of like having a unit of blues pop up on the other end of the board. But for me, as the actual person playing the game, it just made it more efficient for me, and that made it easier for me to focus and enjoy the game.
Well, I think it becomes real quick, and then you finish up here. I think it becomes
No,
more
go for
obvious for your opponents to play against too, because instead of having to like look at your dice, go, okay, when are they gonna just teleport in more shit? They go, they
Right.
look at the unit and they go, oh, if I do this much damage, it's dead. Right. And
Right.
now there are some
Exactly.
caveats and nuances to that, but at a surface level, they've cleaned up that aspect of it. I think where they went wrong is the points on how many wounds it is. I think that's the main problem. By the way, anybody, if we want to get bogged down into the mire that is talking about the problems with Tzeentch, but that's a points fix. That can happen. You know, you probably shouldn't get 50 wounds for 200 points or 100 wounds for 200, whatever the hell the math works out to be. But yeah, so yeah, just as planned. we're talking about Tzeentch instead of list science right now. We'll get to list science in a minute. So that's like change number one. Was there some other stuff in the changing army that is all about change that you really enjoyed?
I think they. Let's see. Was there anything else that jumped out at me?
The teleports, I think, was one of the ones that I gravitated towards.
The teleports was both a pro and a con because that was an area where the complexity actually did add some depth, and I liked that while the splitting is janky, it actually did let me do something a little bit unusual. But then again, that was an area where my army got to do something that most other armies were limited in. I could teleport and then move within 9 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see how that kind of creates some not great experiences there. Because you play against 95% of the other armies, and they are limited in this way. And then you play against this other army. Granted, it's Tzeentch, so of course they're going to be the ones who break the
chaos gets all the toys, and they get to cheat the most. It's true.
Yeah, and so then I get to be like, yes, but then I get to rearrange them 9 inches forward, and now I'm in front of you, and it's like, well, but why?
Right.
So I like the teleport. It makes it cleaner. We follow the same rules as everybody else. Yeah, there's problems with having a 1-drop with lots of good stuff in it. There's plenty of fair critiques to make there, but I did like that at least cleaned it up and made it easier, even if it was a little bit less good in some ways.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the areas where I think Tzeentch probably got quote unquote less good is that trade off. But in the interest of consistency across the game, knowing that if I put my 9-inch bubble down and I play the map, because this ties into that what I was talking about early on, is that raising that water level that so that you have to build the floor a little bit higher too for all the players, right? Like that's one of those things. Like I go 9 inches is 9 inches is 9 inches. This is what just becomes universal. This is what becomes ubiquitous. So the strategy and the tactics will become the same. Yeah, your teleporting is mechanically like it's the same, but like how you set it up and what your army's doing is a little bit different. But the point is I go, do you have any teleports? And you go, yeah. I go, okay, 9 inches. I got to screen 9 inches. Like to know that, because I don't know all the minutia of your army and how it works. And when I first walk up to the table, I know when things teleport, I put down my little 9-inch measuring stick and I go, okay, safe.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And it leads to some more standard language. Teleport means I move somewhere on the board, I have to be 9 away from you. And then an exception, now we have just the one. Oh, the changeling does something a little bit different because of something on his war scroll. You can read it on his war scroll. It's on the app for free. I'll explain it to you. It leaves him with his ass hanging out in the middle of the table. But it's different. It's a changeling thing. It's not a teleport. It's not my teleport is different from your teleport.
Right. Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, exactly. Can I turn up? I'm a dash quiet. Oh man, I'm sorry. I think I need to upgrade my microphone. That's what the Patreon's for, I suppose. Everybody. No.
It's also possible, everyone, that I am loud because I am prone to loud talking syndrome.
Your audio quality is great for me, and I tried to balance off of you, but I'll try to be a little bit louder. Thank you, everybody, for pointing that out. But yeah, no, you were talking about like the complexity versus like depth, right? And I think that it's a teleport. There's a lot of depth to be had from being able to teleport. The fact that we play in 3 dimensions, I don't know that you need to overcomplicate a teleport. And
right, it's complicated enough. Because now your opponent has to be thinking about a certain amount of board space.
Yeah, exactly. They've got to be like doing the beautiful mind thing where they're just seeing all the equations and circles. So that there. I think points were already trending back in a reasonable direction, which is why after the GHB we got to see Tzeentch kind of come back.
Hmm.
We got our like 6 month break from Change Host, and then it came back immediately. Like came back, and now it's back yet even further. And I think that's part of why the book is so maligned is that we never really got a break from Tzeentch being just
Mm.
great. It's almost like people stopped playing it for a little bit there because not everybody wanted to do the endless spell spam. Um,
Sure, yeah. And people had been playing Skyfires and Enlightened and things like that for, since the Tzeentch book came out. And then they didn't
right,
stop being popular when the Beasts of Chaos book came out. So,
right.
um, so yeah, I think Tzeentch has had some enduring benefits to it and some enduring strengths, and seems to just kind of wax and wane on what side of the army seems to be getting the benefits, aside from mortal slaves to darkness Tzeentch, which GW seems to be convinced of, like, you guys will be mediocre forever, and that's the best we can do for you.
Right, right. So I guess speaking of the endless spell change going into your new army, do you still run a bunch of endless spells? Is that, or is it really just it's Daemon Rift now, and that's kind of the main one you need?
I do run some, definitely not nearly as much, especially now that pink horrors can't cast endless spells anymore.
Right.
So in the list that I ran, my host duplicitous list, I have the pendulum, the demon rift, and the emerald life swarm. The life swarm's there to put pinks back on the board. The demon rift does an obscene amount of damage, so I'm going to play that until it gets nerfed into the ground. And then the pendulum is always useful, especially because the changeling is a horror hero in the change host, and so he can be teleported 9 inches away from something and then cast the pendulum.
Yeah, just fling it in there. Cool.
Yeah, and then you can charge him if you want to. He's a demon. He gets his -1 to hit aura. Depending on when you wind up fighting him, he might make you another -1 to hit. Uh, so it was nice to still have that option to have a hero teleport and then set up a spell.
Yeah.
Um, I experimented with the portal, which felt nice to make the Lord of Change a little bit, to project his power out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found after playing a bunch of games was that that wasn't strictly necessary, and so it was a big point sink for something that just wasn't necessarily helping that much.
Spoiler: Umbral Spell Portal isn't really as worth it as it used to be. Obviously, when it was as many spells as you wanted through the portal, it just seemed like the best thing ever. As soon as
Oh,
they
for
toned
sure.
as soon as they toned it down to one spell, this is the question I ask every person who puts Umbral Spell Portal in their army. I ask, what are you throwing through it? Do you need it to be that? Do you need that much reach on it? Can you deploy better to do it? Like, and it's just little
Mhm.
leading questions like that arrive you to yes. It's a little like a flow chart, and if still yes, then take it. But it's not just to throw it in because I want extra range on a spell. It's so oftentimes the trade off is really prominent, just in the fact that you need an extra spell a turn to set it up, and sometimes it's just 18 inches is plenty. 18 inches plus a
Right.
teleport or whatever it may be. So, yeah, those were the
Yeah.
days back at the beginning of the month for Andrew when he just threw as many spells through it as spell portal because he didn't read the FAQ, and it took 5 entire rounds for people to catch it
Yeah, I remember hearing about that,
that he
and
was cheating.
yeah, yeah,
Just
but
like,
he came by it honestly. Games Workshop does not always make it easy, so.
no, and the tracking through multiple books and stuff. So, um, what? So I think a lot of people have a read on Tzeentch and what the problems are.
Mm.
I have a different question. What percentage of your army made it from your old build, your post GHB build, into the new book? What percentage do you think your ideal version? Because
Yeah.
you're probably in a transitional period right now, doing
Mhm.
some list science, figuring some stuff out. But what percentage do you think from what you probably had a core? This is the list from before that you love to play
Mhm.
to.
Yeah, the vast majority actually made the transition pretty well. So, my Lord of Change, my pinks, blues and brims, they all made the transition no problem. Heroes got shaken up a little bit because before I had the blue scribes and I had a herald on foot, swapped them out for the changeling and a gaunt summoner on disc, and then added in 3 flamers into the list just to have a little bit more firepower there. But the overall core of it, all the horrors and then the Lord of Change, that was ready to go from the old list. So actually, a fair amount made it back in.
Okay. Yeah, cool. I know that's one of the things I think they did do a decent job of is making the hero focus a little bit stronger, because before it just wasn't. It didn't feel like it was there for the army. It actually felt like a lot of the heroes were liabilities, and you wanted to play them, but you didn't. Apart from like Blue Scribes, you played Blue Scribes before. I think they're still pretty great. Things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Blue Scribes are definitely nice. I think the issue they might be running into kind of a similar issue that the maybe not the epitome. I think that's the one I'm thinking of, where actually Kairos was what used to run into this, where people would look at him and say, yeah, he's good, but he's actually better as an ally in other armies than he is in his own army.
Right.
So I think the Blue Scribes are nice, and they have some good utility to them, but there's a few other things jockeying for that same position, that same point value.
Yeah, you really have to. I mean, you have to think about it, and some stuff gets hedged out. There's going to be some best stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I guess overall, so we had the FAQ. Banners is the big thing, and we're going to need to. I think we got to clarify. This is a different banner trick you're doing in this list, by the way. The Zangor's banner.
Oh yes, yeah. That one's totally different. When we get to that, I'll explain.
We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. But like, just for people that might be listening along, they didn't necessarily see the discussion there and chatting about the banners. The icon, right? The big thing is with Pinks, and their icon and Destiny dice. So that was like, that had to be clarified twice in the FAQ. So real quick, your read on it, and just so people listening that maybe are uncertain on that. That was the big change, and they toned it down to one teleport now for your army. So those were like the two biggest changes I think that hit you post GHB.
Yeah, I think the one teleport is fair. That was probably the simplest way to modify the change host without having to go back and overhaul something massively, which might have led to a lot of not great feelings. So I think that was a fair approach to trying to rein it in right now, and then later on they could kind of revisit how they want to approach that particular battalion. And then the banners, I think we needed the FAQ for the FAQ, because the Tzeentch WhatsApp was just literally every few hours reigniting the same debate. It was both really frustrating and also really lore appropriate, because all of the players were bickering and conniving and intriguing and trying to tear apart the esoteric wording of the rule to figure out what way it was. It was actually really Tzeentch appropriate. But I am glad they fixed it, so I don't have to argue with people anymore.
Well, that's almost as essential as like, no, it works this way, and then being able to point at a thing that actually says, no, it works this way, or like, yeah, what he said, like, that's what an FAQ answers at their core. That's kind of what they need to be, is just go, it's the way you think it works, or it's not. When they have some non-specific language, or it's a vague answer or whatever, it just continues to exacerbate the problems. I didn't think it was go ahead.
Or if they try to generalize a rule, when they're like, oh, this specific thing, yeah, we should just make a general rule about this. And then 3 other armies are like, no, please don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, we saw it happen with the Corn and FAQ or FEC. FEC got happy about that, but then
yeah, it's like, oh, the FEC buff is in the Corn FAQ. Thank you, Games Workshop.
yeah, and then Beast of Chaos was the big can of worms, right? What they said about Wildfire Taurus,
right?
Took into the general rules completely. I mean, I think that's one of the glaring flaws of our game right now, is that the activation wars just are not clean, and they don't work the way you think they should.
And I think I mentally in some ways compare some of the issues that come up here with Paradox Interactive and their grand strategy games, where I don't generally think that Games Workshop makes these mistakes or causes these issues out of intentional malice. I think it's just the game's so complicated that even if you're trying to hold it all together, eventually you trip on it, and then the people who have the real specific knowledge are like, oh, well, you just broke this thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically, go ahead. Finish your point.
I think that pretty much does finish it. I was going to transition back to overall feelings about the Tzeentch book, but I think the FAQs did a good job in cleaning up what they needed to clean up, and there's still some outlying issues, but I think we'll manage for another few months before they tackle them again.
Right, and the big thing is people. on one hand, I feel like you should just assume that an FAQ is going to come out in 2 weeks to ruin something you had intended. I feel like that's the approach. It shouldn't have to be that way, but I feel like have reservations on buying models until after that first 2 weeks, because like you don't want to get skull cannoned, like
Right, yeah.
Like, so just wait a couple weeks and then commit. But like ultimately on like a bigger scale, you don't want to bin somebody's models they just pre-ordered with your book, because you announced the book.
For sure.
They go in thinking things are going to be a certain way, and then like 2 weeks later you're like, nah, you don't get to play with your toys. They don't work that way. The worst case scenario is what happened with skull cannons, and I would hate to see that. Just shouldn't happen out of an FAQ. Right, you're excited. Yeah. You pre-order. You can't wait to get your flamers. They have this thing. You just saw the one rule spoiler on the internet. You're like, oh, it's gonna be so awesome. Like, think about the progression of excitement and purchasing stuff, and then to go, actually, your toys don't work. Like that's
right.
That's a bad look. So like, I don't know what people expected out of a 2-week FAQ and then a follow-up FAQ like a week later. But I mean, if you have some patience, I don't know that the sky is falling right now. My biggest beef is host Duplicitous saying, no, you don't get to play the game, but like now you just have to solve a riddle. I think we're currently working that problem. As soon as like I realized that the wounds spilled onto the next set of shit, I'm just like, oh, I don't care anymore. Tons of things take infinite damage. Like I kind of like quit caring, as I'm like, oh, it's just the question then for me became, but at how many points? That's where,
right. Yeah.
Like so I transitioned off of just blind hatred of the thing the internet was telling me to hate onto like, oh, well, like what if we just change the points? And then as soon as like I engaged my like logical brain, I'm like, I feel a lot better about Tzeentch personally.
Right.
Largely because I'm a bad guy and I'm a heel apologist. But what's your read overall on Tzeentch? The good, the bad, the ugly, and where you think they'll go in the next, say, here to GHB.
Sure. So my overall read on it, and again, I am by no means the most competitive player out there, which will be made very clear once you see the lists I've actually created for this episode. But my read on the book is that we have some very strong parts in the new book, parts that are like clearly S tier. But then we have a lot of stuff that's really good in the Tzeentch book. A lot of stuff that's A and B tier, solid lists you could take to a tournament, go 3-2, go 4-1, have a good time. They've got some good interactions in there. And that works on the Arcanite stuff. It works on the Mortal stuff. Yeah, they don't get nearly as shiny of tools as the demons do, but they still got some solid things in the book. So I think there are a variety of lists that actually do work decently. And, if we didn't have Eternal Conflagration, Change Host, and Host Duplicitous, you could, I think, still look at that book and say, oh, there's some good stuff in here.
Yeah, I mean, those are the three things. Like, people are listening to other podcasts. They are telling you exactly, dear guests, dear viewer, dear listener, I believe you probably have a good idea of what the problems are with Tzeentch, the things that need to get hammered back in line. You just named all three of them, right? Like that. Right. That's all three of them. I think horrors are so aggressively costed, it's absurd. But like, I can't do anything about that. So am I going to keep making episode after episode of how mad I am at horror point costs? No, I'm not going to do that. Like,
for sure, yeah. Horrors and flamers both need to be looked at. So do gaunts, since they just get to toss horrors down on the table. There's definitely things that I think can be adjusted for points. Like if you're building a Tzeentch list, I looked at Chaos Knights the other day because we have beautiful new Chaos Knights models, and I was like, oh, maybe I should plug some of these in. But why would I do that when I could spend 120 points for Flamers, who will do the same job but from 27 inches?
Right, yeah.
So there's definitely areas where there need to be some tweaks, and I think those tweaks will come, and I think they'll be good. So I think the great is that actually there is some good list variety in there, even if they didn't necessarily do totally right by the Arcanite and Moral side. I think there's still some really good tools for them, and the demons obviously are in really great shape, and you've got a lot going for you on the demon side. Mm-hmm. The bad is most of the battalions are not good.
Which exacerbates the issue of change host. I mean, if all your battalions are trash, you don't have people out there like me going, like, oh, like, yeah, change host is clearly the best, but like this other thing's about as good, just different or worse in this one way. And so then someone like me who like will self comp, I would take that other thing just because I know people are really mad at change host right now. Like, it's like you don't have that option. It's like really shooting yourself in the foot with the run gun at like the starting line. Like,
yeah,
like,
right, yeah.
You're like,
and I think one of the problems is that your other option. So let's say you would say, okay, I'm gonna self comp. I'm not gonna do change host. I'm gonna do multitudinous host instead. That's potentially even more offensive in a different way. And so it's like, oh, so our next step down is still terrible. Okay, great. Yeah. And terrible in terms of play experience. I think multitudinous host is actually strong. You just need to be a robot to properly play it and complete your games on time.
Yeah. No.
And you could, I think, put some of the other battalions in there, but they're just not. They're not great.
Yeah.
And it's a real shame. They could have been better, and they're just not.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel I've said this take before. I feel like battalions are just a complete accident. I've never seen any degree of anything that even smells remotely close to consistency with battalions in any book.
Right.
Like it's just a roulette wheel of like if you get the good battalions or not. I don't. They're never pointed correctly. It seems like I don't. Like are they? Do they just have an actual dartboard and they're lobbing darts at the board? Like, and that's what. Like it's just like all the battalions that will ever be written are just like on one big dartboard in the office, and they're just like lobbing. They're like, okay, we gotta do battles. We gotta have six battalions here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, boom! They got the one that says is awesome, gives you a bunch of teleports, and you can fit your whole army in it. Okay, change host. And then they like fill. It's like ad libs, like they just fill in the descriptors.
Right.
I have no idea.
I think it's either one of two things or both. One is the battalions they do when the stimulants are wearing off, whether that's coffee, whether that's psychiatric medication. It's like that's when those are trailing off. They're like, oh fuck, battalions. The change host is good. Toss that back in.
Yeah.
The other option I think is that they've got one of those. I don't know exactly what they're called, but for like certain games like Tombola or other stuff where it's got the different balls or slips of paper in it and you spin it to flip it up. And they just toss in there like, all right, we're putting 3 A's, 5 B's, a few D's in there. And who's up first? Petrifex is first. You get +1 save. You get -1 right. Oh, you got both the A's. Well done, Petrifex.
you got both the yeah, you got both the A's. Awesome. Yeah, like what was it Sean Zor says here in chat, some are too painfully narrative, and I think that's true. But like,
right,
as we've come to learn on many a episode here, narrative doesn't mean you have to be bad.
Right, yeah. Look at this very narrative list on your screen right now. Yeah. Clearly a story writer's dream.
Yeah. No, this is great. So yeah, and then the trajectory then I think is the last part of my multi-part question there. What do you think the trajectory is for? Obviously, we know it's S tier busted right now. Come on, we know it.
Yeah.
Or I like Vince's bent leaning towards broken because I think there's still some solutions there. Scout moves, having teleports yourself, any army that can deploy off the table. That's a very specific toolkit though, and then any army that can match you in drops, that's a very short list of armies with that toolkit too. And then anyone that can deal infinite damage can actually potentially chew their way out of the blob at the gum ball machine at the beginning there, and then start to actually play the map. There are some solutions to this problem. It's just they're kind of, it feels very painful to look for them right now.
Right, and some armies will have access to those, other armies won't. Sometimes you'll have to expand out to things like mercenaries to do it, which now requires you to be thinking even beyond your ally selection. So I think definitely it's going to force a little bit of a paradigm change, just like we've seen with some other books. When FEC came out, and now we have this strikes first on this extremely strong model. It's like, okay, shit, I have to deal with this army that can potentially fight multiple times before I get the chance.
I'm glad you go ahead and finish.
And those paradigm shifts, not everyone is going to be able to match up, but some are. And I think gradually we'll see how things play out. But I think it's still fair to say the Tzeentch tome is gonna have to get some adjustments. It is just probably trending too strong right now, even accounting for eventual shifts to try to compensate against it.
Yeah, and I think I had a decent conversation with Darren Watson here during just one of my random streams. He asked me about, like, am I gonna make these changes to my OBR list to, like, beat Tzeentch and stuff like that, or like what changes would I make to my list? And I'm like, I look at the game in terms of, like, wins and losses, and I think everyone's like, somebody's carrying an L for you no matter what. They're the hard matchup, they're the hard counter. You get the wrong objective, your dice aren't running that day. Like, I'm not gonna, like, change my army to try to beat Tzeentch, actually. Like, my plan is to, like, if I encounter Tzeentch, play the table and lose them. I'm not changing my list because I'm just going to strengthen myself against the rest of the field. The representation isn't stupendously high. It's not a, you must deal with this with your army. Like, you don't have to, like, Tzeentch, the problem with Tzeentch is the tools to solve the problem for them versus, like, say, Petrifex Elite. Petrifex Elite, it's mortal wounds, mobility, rend. That solves a lot of problems. Like, in a lot of games, or against a lot of armies. With Tzeentch, you have to, like, you have to be much more conscientious of the tools you take to try to beat them. It's almost like you have to tailor your list specifically to beat them. And I think that like, some armies, like Beast of Chaos, like, I'm already doing that anyway. Like,
right,
IDK, I'm already doing that anyway. Like, there are armies out there that are already building the way they need to beat Tzeentch. But a lot of the, like, the sort of, like, that fat middle armies, they're not. And the tools are pretty scant across their tome, so they really have to go hard. And I say just punt the matchup, build to your strengths. If you, like, get really good against the matchup, too. Like, that's another, like, play Tzeentch players. Play Tzeentch players like you at the LGS, because you're going to give them a great game. Regardless, you're not going to bust their teeth in. And they're going to probably learn some stuff and be less afraid of the matchup down the line.
Right, yeah, and I think those practice games are good. Whenever I play against Kyle and Christian, I don't often win those games, but I often learn a lot about how the army plays against different matchups. So if you have access to a Tzeentch player who is someone you actually enjoy playing against, then yeah, go ahead, engineer some matchups so you can get some practice in. But I think you're right. If you try to aim too broad with what your army list can handle, you might reach a point where you're not actually handling any of them very well.
Right.
And so sometimes your army just, that matchup might be too hard for you. Maybe you hope for a good battle plan, and then maybe that plays a little bit more to your army strengths. But sometimes, you're just gonna have to see how the dice handle it, and that game might not pull out for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not telling anybody to not feel bad about their matchups against Tzeentch and that they're not that bad, it's fine, they don't need changes. That's not the read here. I'm just saying, like, the problems are pronounced, we kind of know what they are, and now it's, what do you do with that information? Like, what do you do with it? You can choose to seize up, go full paralysis mode, or you can address the problem. Or in my case, I'm just like, whatever, I'm just punting the matchup and playing the games that I'm going to have fun with. If I encounter it at a tournament, whatever. If I played you or Andrew, who's in chat gang here, like, you're my friends. We're gonna have good games no matter what. And I think that you look at an LGS capacity. I don't know these people who don't know everybody at their LGSs. Maybe it's because I've always lived in smaller towns with more close knit groups, but I don't have, like, a Warhammer world or something like that where it really is just like 100 random strangers that could just be passing through at any given time with their change host lists. But, like, you're gonna have to do some being an adult and being social, like, because straight up telling people they can't play with their toys is just not a take I'll ever behold to. Like,
yeah, and if things are egregiously bad, if there is a community like a local game store community and they feel like, just no one's having good times playing this army. We're doing a tournament. We don't really want it to be present, and they want to comp it and say, you know what, just please don't bring this. I think that's fair. But I do think that the army is going to get adjustments down the line. I think the army needs to be adjusted and deserves to be adjusted, and that hopefully through doing some of that, we'll gradually reach a balance that actually feels a little bit better without completely defanging the entire army and making it so like, all the Tzeentch stuff goes back in the bin again because the points are too high.
Well, yeah, and so that actually brings up an interesting point. What if you are just a good guy Tzeentch player? You know, like you're not the one who just saw that flamers were like the most just disgusting thing imaginable and just went out and bought 16 flamers, and you're like, ha 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 ha, and you're just like laughing and you're underlit with like green fire, and you're just bringing those flamers that look like a dildo that melted to the table. Like you're not that guy. You've actually like you love Tzeentch for 2 years. They're the army that you always regretted not building. What if you're the Tzeentch player who suddenly finds yourself catching heat right now? If you're ironically the one catching the heat instead of your opponents from your flamers, what would you kind of say to them? What do you think the right course of action is for that?
Right. Yeah, no, I've experienced this firsthand since the book came out because, we had, I think, one of the heats right after, and there was a lot of ill will.
It didn't. Well, the thing is Tzeentch never went away. Like, it
didn't
really go away, so people were already like, oh, the clock boss, Tzeentch, and the spell spam Tzeentch. And then it's like... And then they got the damage. That's the thing that, like, pushed them over the edge, is because, like, yeah, they're a clock boss, but they're not doing infinite damage. They're just taking infinite amount of time from you. And, like, that felt very Tzeentchian, but, like, you gotta finish games at a tournament, so they're like, you know what, we'll accelerate the games as if they get to do all the bullshit still, but now they do all the damage, too. And so, like, it's just like, like, the world became on fire. Like, it was... This wasn't going to sneak under the radar. Like, Slaves to Darkness, there was no other bigger release. I guess KO came out too, but KO's got its own problems. Like, it was like, no one was going to not pay attention to the Tzeentch release and see what happened with it. It
for sure.
But yeah, what do you do? What do you do? You're like waiting for this tome. You've been playing Tzeentch or let alone been playing Tzeentch for a year already. Like, what does good guy Tzeentch player do at the LGS?
Yeah. I have a lot more empathy for the Slaanesh players now. I will tell you that much. So I think what you have to do is you have to remind yourself that you're allowed to be excited about the game. Your tome is allowed to be strong, and your army is allowed to be strong. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're playing in a legal way, you're not cheating. You're not doing anything that is not how. Against the rules.
Yeah,
then you are allowed to go and bring a strong army to a competitive event. Tournaments are designed to be competitive, and people want to win. And if you bring a strong army and you win, well, that's kind of the whole point of the activity. So,
mine is to drink beer and throw dice, but there is a very pronounced. Right. There's a very pronounced expectation for at a competitive event, people are going to bring competitive stuff.
For sure, yeah. And so I think it's worthwhile to take a measure of self-compassion here. You're allowed to enjoy the thing that you enjoy. It's allowed to be strong. You're allowed to bring strong things to a tournament, and you're allowed to win against your opponents. And sometimes that might be a little bit more of a shutout, and that's unfortunate. It's not your fault, the individual, that some rules writers created something that is just too strong. Mm-hmm. So you have to remind yourself, it's not your fault. Even if you're bringing that strong army, you're not breaking any rules. It's okay to do that. Now, if you're playing against your friends and they say to you, hey, we're not really enjoying this, could you please do something different? And you insist on doing it, now you're getting into problematic territory. But if you're going to an event, you're bringing something strong, that's okay. And remind yourself that it is okay to do that.
Yeah, okay. I see a lot of people popping off about the size of events, 2,500 events. Why don't we make 2,500 the standard? Do you have any thoughts to weigh in on that? Since it's really a lot of people are talking about it at chat. The round times naturally have to go up to compensate for playing with an extra 1,000 points at the table, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I am guilty of not being the fastest and most efficient player. As I do really try to do it. So I am not necessarily in favor of increasing the number of points, because then I'll have even more things to have to try to be fast about. So I personally feel like I think 2000's fine, and if you want to adjust within that, like I'd rather GW ratchet up the points and give us fewer, more selective options than keep increasing the number of points available. But that's coming from me as someone who tends to be a little bit slower in terms of play and who wants to finish games.
Yeah, turning over models even like from a having to now suddenly build 2,500 points and
right
now you're having to build 2-3 extra units. 2,500 points for Beast of Chaos is a nightmare, by the way. You know how many models I have on the table? I have like 200 models, and I'm probably churning through about 300 in a game because of all the Ungors that are just blowing up.
Right, yeah. It's like, how many Bestigors can I fit in the list? 120, 150?
Yeah.
Get the paintbrushes.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, no, see, 9-Volt Cat, their maximum pants. I don't need somebody to tell me it's okay to bring my OBR. I embrace being the bad guy these days. I will never be made to feel bad for playing my army again. I don't need that. No, I think that there's a worthy, I think there's a worthy message in like, be an adult, like be an adult, like with this game that we all play and have like some common ground to start from.
Yeah. And if you decide that it is too uncomfortable for you to bring, a certain version of an army, maybe you're not enjoying the way your opponents are experiencing it and things like that, you're also allowed to not play the strongest thing, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
If you want to go, play a Zangor build and you want to just put 90 Zangor on the table and run them at the enemy, go for it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You give yourself permission. You neither have to feel bad about bringing the strong thing, nor do you have to feel bad about not bringing the strong thing.
Well, there's a little bit of a paradox there too. Is like some people feel the pressure to compete, right? Like if I'm not giving myself the tools to win games, what if I lose games and people judge me?
Right?
Like it's a little voice that can persist through some folks' heads, and like I get it. I feel that like sometimes it's like I gotta show up to a table and I gotta represent myself well, and I gotta give people a good game, and I have all these pressures on myself to like have good games with people, and in some translations good games mean competitive games for people, if every one of my opponents stomps me in 30 minutes, are they even having fun? Did they get enough time to enjoy the game? There is a little bit of an insecurity there, but I think if you're playing what you genuinely enjoy, or something that you've really put your own spin on, that you can have good games regardless of the outcome. And that can,
absolutely,
self-comping, making zany lists, like whatever however you get your enjoyment from the game, it's okay to lean into that. Painting, you love the models. You don't even look at a war scroll. You look at the kits and you say, how many of these can I fit in my army? And then you just go to town painting. Like, if that's how you want to play the game, you walk up to the table and you tell me that, first off, I'm going to be like, easy game. No, I'm kidding. No.
I think many of us, I shouldn't say we all, because that's too broad, but I think many of the players that I have met and talked to really appreciate that. When someone comes to the table and is like, did you know I can put 5 dragons on the table? And I love these damn things. It's like, fuck, I'm playing FAQ. But also, I'm excited that you're excited.
Well, I mean, that's where it kind of sucks, right? Like when the best thing happens to be the thing that you love, and now you have to prove that you're not just the filth player.
Right. Yeah. FAQ is actually probably a bad example. Probably a better example is someone who's like, I have 4 Mutilith Vortex Beasts. I don't know what's going to happen. It's like, I don't know either, but we're going to glad you're happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, to that end, we're going a little bit. We got the WAAC out the way now, talking about how winning at all costs one must be. But now we're gonna go with the Wacky. So I'd say you're well, the way that Hobby Bear put it, the way that Brendan put it is best. How do these lists come about? Because you have some pretty wacky lists out there. Like, do you just I guess how do they come about? I'm staring at this one and I just like keep looking over and snickering. The name is Do You Have a Flag? And it's Zangor, and it's just the Zangor banners list, and I just like keep snickering to myself.
Well, the first thing, of course, is decide what comedian or band or other thing is your inspiration for the list. You need a title. The first thing is you need the title. From there, you can build. No, that's actually all bullshit. So normally it's that for me. I notice a thing, and then there's some part of my brain that says, "Can I do the things with it?" So
Okay, go ahead.
so just something catches my eye, and then I'm like, well, how much can I mess with that? How much can I tune that? Is there something there? Especially if it's something that's not the obvious thing, which is not to, the diamond in the rough sometimes stands out to you, but you're like, is it a diamond or is it?
Right.
So go ahead.
No, so for like people who are I think there's people out there who like go through their book and then they see like a rule and they're like, oh, that's really cool. And then now they got to take that next step because you said something very very simple in there, but like there was an S in there. It's not just the thing; it becomes what are the other things that modify the thing that I'm gravitating towards, and then that becomes, I think, the list science quest at that point is to find the other things, right?
Right, exactly. Because you go from I have an idea or I want to build around this thing. So now theoretically, what does that look like once I've got, 1,800 more points of it that I'm working around?
Right.
Is this just a one-off fun thing that I have in my army, or can I actually really build some stuff around this? And I think it becomes an interesting thought exercise. You might not necessarily get to something that's good, but I think just by going through that practice, you'll either come up with something hilarious that might be terrible, or you might come up with something that actually is pretty decent and might catch people out because it's not the obvious thing.
Right. Right.
Or it'll be janky as hell, and then you take it to something like Holy Wars or Holy Havoc. Table's gonna kill everything anyway, so I don't care.
Right. Yeah. I mean that's why I loved Holy Havoc personally. Is like it's just like Holy Havoc and NashCon were two of those tournaments where I'm like, this isn't even like a tournament for me. This is list science dot like the exhibition. Like I'm just
right. Yes.
And real quick, a point here in chat, gang. You're not entirely wrong about the more balanced doesn't mean not broken. There are some outliers, right? The outliers are the things that concern us, but the average, like, sort of aggregate, that fat middle, we're getting that nice bell curve. You're not surprised to see any 1 of 10 armies podiuming, which is a lot better, healthier than it ever was before. Variance, variety being the spice of life means there's meaningful decisions being made at the list building and the army selection phase. If I want to compete, I can pick 1 of 10 armies now, not just 1 of 2. Like, that's very healthy. And then it's going to go even further, even deeper, where I can pick 1 of 10, but like, what are the other 10 army, or what are the other 9 armies people are playing, and how do I like beat them? And then you start to like meta the meta. Like, that's when I think it's truly awesome. And the outliers happen, and there's broken shit, but like,
sure,
broken shit's temporary. The general health, the general trend is what I'm more concerned with. Because go on.
And I think now we're in a different place than we were even a year ago, where you could pick probably any army in the game, and there's only a few of them now that we would be like, maybe don't pick that army. Whereas a year ago, actually, there were quite a few of those options. That, a year ago, if someone said, hey, I really want to play Slaves to Darkness, we'd be like, maybe not. But now if someone says, hey, I'd like to play Slaves to Darkness, it's like, great, you've got dozens of different options, and they're actually pretty decent.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. I mean, and you go into these books and like the WAAC versus Wacky balancing act becomes like more fun. Like, some of the like the really cool stuff you can do is less obvious, but you're still sitting at like a 3-2 army, and you're like, you know what? I was probably a 3-2 player anyway. Like, let's yeah.
I think another way of putting it that maybe works here is, statistically, the world now is a safer, better place to live than it ever has been. That doesn't mean there aren't shitty situations and terrible things going on in the world, But on the whole, when we look at the data, you're probably better off living now than in any other time. And I think that's kind of where Age of Sigmar is at. Yeah, we have problems that need to be sorted out for sure, but you're probably better off picking up the game now than maybe you ever have been.
Look, I can be an optimist in Age of Sigmar because this is where my naturally sardonic, like, pessimistic self comes to, like, be happy about something. I don't know if I can sign off on the world thing.
Yeah, that's very much a, like, numbers, please comfort me position.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Like, that might be going too far. Although, I did, of all the points in space in human history, I did get to, like, exist on this tiny blip in human history, let alone, galactic universal history, in a time period that I got to share with David Bowie and Freddie Mercury. Like, both those dudes were actively making music whilst I was alive. Like, that is something to be... That's something to be pretty optimistic about. So there's some good...
For
sure. I guess, yeah. I mean, it's perspective.
We lived on the Earth at the same time as George Carlin and B. Arthur. And, I can't think of anything better than that.
There you go. Yeah, Mitch Hepburn and Bill Hicks, too. Like, like, we had a lot of these, like, awesome contemporaries. And furthermore, I get to live in a time period where I can just, like, go book from 1,000 years ago and, like, read it. Like,
right, yeah.
like instead of, like, not do that.
right, yeah. No, we've access to more information for better or worse now.
For better or worse, indeed. Yeah, I mean, and that's, what do you do with the information? That's at the core of list science too. Is like where you just throw the the end part out of it to, like, solve the problem. You never stop to ask if you should be doing it. But, like, at the core of, like, when I say list science, I say, it's an idea you can test. That's what a hypothesis is. You're forming a hypothesis, and you're going to go out and you're going to go out and you're going to, like, gather your samples. And by samples, I mean play games. And then you're going to, like, go, well, did my hypothesis hold up or not? And, so so I'm staring at a list here. I've got Gaunt Summoner on Disc of Tzeentch. And then I've got 4 Gaunt Summoners of Tzeentch. Plus I've got 40 Zangors in MSU. And I've got a Darkfire Daemon Rift because why wouldn't you? The list is called, as I said earlier, Zangor Banners. Do you have a flag? It's in Host Duplicitus. What was the thing that you were reading through that, like, stuck out to you? I think I've got a hint in the title, but what was standing out to you, and what did you do with that?
So when I was getting into Tzeentch, I looked over the Zangor War Scroll, and then looked over it another dozen times, because it's still one of the most complicated War Scrolls in the game. Thanks for not fixing that, GW, by the way. And this one thing stood out to me, because normally with units, they get, your banner does some little thing. It's +1 bravery, or, sometimes you get nicer abilities than that. But for Zangor, they had this, icon bear, and you get the Ornate Totems ability. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's an actual ability here. I'm just going to read through Ornate Totems here quickly. While this unit has 1 or more icon bearers at the start of your hero phase, you can pick 1 enemy unit within 18 of this unit that's visible to it. Okay, fair enough so far. Roll 1 dice for each wizard that's within 9 of the Zangor unit. Oh, wait. Hang on. Let me make sure that I'm reading this right, because they use this unit. Yeah, this unit being the Zangor unit. So while your Zangor unit at the start of the hero phase is within 18 of an enemy, you can pick them, and then you count the number of wizards within 9 of your Zangor unit, and for each 4-up, you deal a mortal wound to the enemy unit that you picked. So I looked at that and said, oh, okay, that's a neat little ability. This unit that mostly is just a melee combat unit now has a way to project mortal wounds out without you having to cast spells. It just does the thing. It does the damage. They've got an 18-inch shooting attack, essentially. So then I asked, okay, well, but you need to have wizards nearby, and you can't really count on the enemy to leave their wizards within 9 inches of you. By that point, your unit should have probably killed them already. So how many wizards can I put in the list? And so the initial version of this list, I started doing some math, and I realized you want to have roughly an equal ratio of Zangor units to wizards in order to get the maximum number of checks on this totem ability. Because if you just take 10 Zangor and 2 wizards, that's 20 checks. But if you take 9 Zangor and 3 wizards, that's 27 checks. And then the closer you get, the more checks you get, and the more mortal wounds you potentially do. So I decided, all right, let me keep tuning this and see how far I can go. So the initial list I built, I think, was a Beasts of Chaos list. It had a Zangor Shaman, 5 Bray Shamans, because they were cheap as hell, and then just as many Zangor as I could stuff in there. And that was pretty good. But then Slaves to Darkness comes out, and now suddenly the Gaunt Summoner doesn't just get to summon from a Realm Gate, which good luck finding one on the table. Now they just get to summon Pink Horrors for free. It's like, oh, okay, that's great. Now I can put out Chaff to protect my Zangor and get a good wizard. And then the Tzeentch book comes out, and now these horrors are, well, actually they were wizards before. So now it's like my Gaunt Summoners are producing more wizards. Now I can put more wizards on the table even more quickly. And suddenly I'm thinking, well now. So this list, just to give you an idea, you start with 5 wizards, and by the end of your first turn you have 10 wizards, and you've got the 4 units of Zangor. So potentially you now actually have built out this whole mortal wound shooting part of your army that never has to cast a spell, that never has to do anything other than start a hero phase within 18 inches of the enemy. So this is the list. Now, granted, this is normally the point at which things start falling apart, because then you actually put it on the table and someone's like, but you're a 10 drop and I get to you in turn 1.
Right.
It's like, oh, that is a problem, isn't it?
This is the exact. Oh man, this is exactly what you said at the onset of the show. Is like, you just like, can I do this thing? And then you just like, you do it. And that's the other part of that, is you put it on the table. And this is the sort of thing, is you want to like be snickering as you walk up to the table, and like and like you want to tell your opponent about the trick you're about to do, and you're gonna get 1 or 2 reactions like oh no, like that's like that's busted, or like whatever, and then you're gonna get those people who just fucking laugh like I did.
Yeah. It's like, you could try. I'm happy that you have a thing you want to do.
No, like I want to see it work. Like my brain, I'm supremely curious as a human, and that part of my brain, like I am the cat that would die for being too curious. Luckily, I live in modern society. Like it like my curious brain goes, okay, let's see what happens. Like, okay, chances are I'm gonna charge across the table turn 1 and hit you. You know who would hate this army though? Bone Reapers.
You're right, yeah. Yeah, because you guys, not so great at the charging across the table thing, as it turns out.
And mortal wounds, my only weakness. How did you know? Like like the Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. Bullets, my only weakness. How did you know? Like that.
So, and I want to stress that this is a Zangor list, and that has nothing to do with the 250 wounds of horrors you summon onto the table in turn 1. Right. It's definitely a Zangor list.
Right. The funny thing is, apart from the drop problem, I think you could take this list into the wild and perform. And this is like the hypothesis is asked, and now we have to go test it. I think you could take this list into the wild and actually like get the combo to work a couple times, and you have bought your ticket for the roller coaster, and you're like, woo! Like you went down that coaster. Have you gotten the chance to like actually play this list yet?
I have not. I have not actually played any of my Zangor banner lists yet, but Christian, for better or worse world, has purchased some Gaunt Summoners for me as a gift. So be prepared. It might be coming at some point. How I see this happening in an optimal scenario, you get your turn, your Gaunts are still alive, most of your Zangor are hopefully still alive. You summon on these 50 horrors who are now your wall of wizards in front of your Zangor, who are now backed by wizards. Every one of your Gaunt Summoners gets access to both the Lore of Fate and the Lore of Change, so they can cast any of the Tzeentch lore spells.
Mm-hmm.
you have all of the pink horrors casting their spells. So turn 1, you get 10 spells. But then turn 2 onward, assuming everything's alive, you get 15. And you know what you can summon on with those points.
I mean, you're
more wizards.
The problem is you're starting to step on. You have so many spellcasters. You don't have enough spells in your book anymore to cast.
Right. Yes, you can run out, which is why you hope you're in the realms. And as I learned recently, someone pointed out, you can cast a spell and have it do nothing. You don't have to have a target to successfully cast a spell.
Right. This took me a while to learn because I'm used to Magic the Gathering, where you must have all your modes of casting. If it says 2 targets, you have to have 2 targets. You know,
right?
Like you have to. Like in Age of Sigmar, spells don't even check for range until after you have cast them, rolled the dice. They don't care, and then the spell happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So, your Gaunts get all of their lore spells. Your Pinks can cast their War Scroll spell. That's the only thing they can cast. So you don't actually have to work for them. And then you can cast whatever the hell else you want from the realm. And, who cares if it has a target? Maybe there's some good stuff in there, maybe not. And if you're not playing in the realms, well, you at least got, all 5 of your lore spells, Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and the War Scroll spell from the Gaunt Summoner. So that's still a very decent number of spells you're getting, plus the Demon Rift if the enemy's in range, which, by the way, does damage based on the number of wizards around the Demon Rift.
Yeah. I like that you have this, other combo. This is, oh man, I love this. This is why I like, the only format of Magic I play anymore is EDH, because this shit happens all the time. Where you're just like, I didn't even expect there to be a combo between these 2 cards in my 100-card deck. Oh, yeah, it does. The big combo just happened. That's what just happened with Darkfire Demon Rift. You're like, it's a great spell. Might as well put it in there. And then you're like, oh my god, it synergizes with everything I'm already doing. It's great.
It's the endless spell version of the Zangor banner.
I love earlier on here in chat, someone's just like, your list does what? Show me. And I just immediately got the Morpheus. I know Kung Fu. Show me.
Which actually this does make me realize that I missed an opportunity when I made my team to not convert it to have a Zangor in the back holding the whole just as a banner to be like, it's fine, I got it, guys, it's good.
I would love to see the banners as machine guns. And they're holding the banner itself and it's still a banner. It's still very much the Zangor banner. It just happens to have you do the lazy head swap version of putting a machine gun on. You just glue it straight on. You just right on top, because they've got the little lick of flame. Just
right, yeah.
A quick just glue it on top of the flame. Right.
Yeah. Just grab any kit from any Chaos 40k kit, grab the guns out of it, and then just glue them on top of your Zangor totem there.
Yeah, so this is actually really cool because Hobby Bear's here in chat. His Brew City Brawl, he usually has a list of trophies that are they reward you to make unconventional lists. So last year it was he had the big 3. I know he's got a couple here, but if you go 3 and 2 and you have sort of the best thing with your clearly the wacky list, you could get a trophy with something like this. That's what
I should. I need someone to just make a trophy that I can win for doing stupid shit, and then I can add a trophy to the case, which has basically just sports trophies in it.
Yeah, Snowflake Trophy gonna be lit. All right, this is. I didn't want to start with my favorite one, but I think this set the tone for just exactly what I'm talking about with wacky lists.
So that one is probably, it's one of my 2 favorites, I would say.
Well, and this is something you've been refining the whole time, every iteration. You just
right, yeah.
And just
you can listen, world. You can check my tweets, and I have a tweet that says the first thing I'm doing with this Tzeentch book is fixing my Zangor banner list. I have the tweets to prove it.
Perfect. Yeah, we can go to the tape. All right, so we have the next list I've got up here is the Mortal Realms Beautification Committee. This is a Living Cities Cities of Sigmar list. You want to take us through it?
Sure. So I had the thought back before when we first got malign sorcery and we got all the endless spells. I had the thought of theoretically, if you wanted to cast all of them, if you feel the table is too boring, there's not enough interesting terrain, painting their army just for tabletop standard, and you want the table to look pretty and interesting, and you want to do that by casting every endless spell in the game, could you do it? And it turns out the answer is yes, comfortably, and actually you can do more than that. So to walk you through it, as a committed Darkling Covenants player, I decided, well, of course, the thing I'm going to do to use to cast this are sorceresses, because they knife a guy and they get +2 to cast. Yeah. Easily one of the most useful and easiest to get bonuses to cast in any army. It doesn't cost you a lot. You don't really care if those guys die anyway, and it's an easy +2 bonus. So now you'd think that I would say, like, oh, I'll put it in Hallowheart and then get that +6 to cast, or whatever you're going to get. But I put it in that list and realized I had points left over. So then I said, well, why limit myself to just all of the generic endless spells? I'm in Cities of Sigmar. I can have the Stormcast endless spells too.
Yeah.
So then I put a Stormcast wizard in. And then I still had points. So then I said, well, why limit myself to just Stormcast and generic? I can put a Sylvaneth wizard in the list. And then I put the Sylvaneth spells in there too. And I still had enough points to put a sorceress on a dragon for no good reason at this point anymore. She was on there when it was Halloween, but now I don't need her to be on there. But why the hell not?
What about Forbidden Power? Oh, you have to rework
Now I put in the Forbidden Power once, but I left out. So I did not actually put in every single endless spell. I'm sorry. It's a little bit aggrandized there. I left out the Bringy Dingy, Lunchbox the Bringy Dingy, and the Soul Scream Bridge, because for this list, I really have no reason to use them, which I realize is probably a tough thing to be worried about at this point in the list building process on this list. But I genuinely looked at it and said, like, even this is pushing it. I've got no good reason to put them on the table.
Add Flesh Eater Mercs for more endless spells. Well, at that point, you're starting... Yeah. So this is 21 endless spells, and all of them conceivably do something.
Yes. So, just to walk you through, for those listeners out there, we have a Sorceress on Black Dragon. We have 3 Sorceresses on foot, a Knight Incanter, and Branch Witch. And we're only able to do that in Living City, so that's why we're in Living City. And then we've got 3 units of 10 Bleak Swords, who I'm going to murder myself, so the opponent doesn't even have to worry about killing them. And actually, the original version of this list, I think, was just 6 Sorceresses on foot and 30 Bleak Swords. And I was like, my opponent doesn't have to deal a single wound over the course of the game. I will happily kill all of them on my own. And then we have, and I'll try and go through this as quickly as I can, the Aether Void Pendulum, the Balewind Vortex, the Chronomantic Cogs, the Emerald Life Swarm, the Geminids, the Horror Gas, the Malevolent Maelstrom, the Prismatic Palisades, the Purple Sun, the Quicksilver Swords, the Gnashing Jaws of Ravanac, Shards of Valagar, Soul Snare Shackles, the Suffocating Gravetide, the Burning Head, the Umbral Spell Portal, the Celestian Vortex, the Deus Arcanum, the Everblaze Comet, the Glade Worm, and the Vengeful Skull Root. End of list.
End of list. End of list. So you actually step on your own toes here, because you can't... Each wizard can only cast 1 endless spell. So you're only getting out, what is that? You've got the six wizards
per turn.
So you're only getting out 6 per turn, which feels like a real shame to me.
It is. It is a real shame. So, but you're putting enough just junk on the board that if even half of those stay on the board long enough, then eventually just utter mayhem will happen in between every round, as 8 to 9 to a dozen endless spells all have to get moved around. It becomes an entire phase all on its own. And so not only have you made the table much prettier, you have injected utter mayhem into the normal course of this game.
And the list is, of course, the Mortal Realms Beautification Committee, because that's what they're doing. They're making the tables prettier.
And in the lore, this would be a group of insane people, because they make it clear in Malign Sorcery that a single endless spell present in the realms takes like a dedicated team of wizards to dispel, half of which are probably going to die. Like, removing one endless spell is a suicide mission for an experienced wizard, and my list has 21 of them.
Like, so now what my brain does when I see this list is I'm like I want to play this army, and my goal now becomes to get all of my spells on the table at once. I'm not even trying to win the game.
Right, yes. Your goal is totally different from whatever the actual objective of the game happens to be. It's like someone will come over and be like, what is even happening on this table? And the answer genuinely is, I don't know, but I'm enjoying it. I am, because I'm casting the spells. My opponent is not.
Well, like, I mean, but that's the thing, is like, we talk about, and some of my narrative episodes is sort of like finding your narrative in the game. You know, this can be, you know, I'm going to kill your general, right? Like, I'm not playing to like win the objective game. It's like, this guy is, you know, fist punch face smasher of the clan Smash Face, and he only smashes the faces of the coolest generals. And so you just have this one iconic like brute or whatever with a thermal rider cloak, or not brute, war boss on foot with a thermal rider cloak, and his whole job is to just hunt down people's generals and kill them, right? So when every time you go to like a tournament, LGS, wherever you are, you're just like, you're gonna just try to have him kill people's generals, and you're creating your own little like narratives in that moment. This army's narrative writes itself.
It really does.
My goal is to summon 21 endless spells before the game is over. I love that you're murdering your own dudes for this goal. It adds that extra something. Oh man.
Yeah. So
like I love the banner list because I think that's got some gas. I mean, you're either gonna get alpha and die, or you're gonna actually be able to do the plan. And I'll take that coin flip. There's a lot of alpha armies in the game, not as many as there used to be. And sometimes the thing with alpha armies is sometimes their dice just fail them, and if they fail them, you've already won. You know, like you whiff all you whiff all your charges, you whiff all your attacks, and then you're just like, you walked up to within 9 inches of me.
Yeah.
And you just like,
on that banner list, if your alpha fails and you're within 8, thanks for handing this to me. I really wanted to do this.
Yeah, I really wanted to. So, like, that's... Like, so that one, I'm like, I'd actually gamble on the Zangor banner list. But this one, I actually want to try. Because I own most of these endless spells. Because, I've got the box... They're all on the sprues still. My buddy's got the... My buddy's got all the Sylvaneth ones, and he's never going to use them, because Sylvaneth players don't use them.
Right.
Like, this is... I see a reality where I actually try to cast 21 endless spells in a game. And then, like, I do that. The problem with this one is I don't feel like this is the gift that keeps on giving. It's that, like, my quest is to get all 21 spells out. Right? Like, that's my quest. And as soon as I complete that, I just, I'm done with the army now. Like,
right. Yeah, the Zangor banner list potentially actually plays the game and, like, wins by the objectives. This list wins by breaking your opponent.
I mean, you do mortal wounds for some of these spells.
And that's a secondary thing. I'm doing mortal wounds to their brain. And that's how I potentially win with this list.
Oh my god, you are a Tzeentch player. And here I thought you were just like a good guy Stormcast Eternals player, happened to fall in love with some models. Or no, you really just have the Tzeentch brain. Like, I was memeing before when I was calling you like the WAAC Tzeentch, but like no, like your WAAC isn't win at all costs. It's like mortal wound their brain at all costs. Oh, that's great. Go ahead.
It's the inverse version of the Imperial Guard meme about the planet broke before the guard did. It's like, well, my opponent broke before the actual objectives did, so I think I win.
Yeah, there's another Safeguard's got this reminds me of the Spider-Man meme, but with this kind of power you could cure Nurgle's plague, but I don't want to cure the plague. I want to cast more endless spells. I want my opponent to leave confused.
Yes, there's no greater victory for this list than for your opponent to say, "I won?"
Question mark. Like, you actually, like, you see them standing there still thinking about it after they've won, and they're just like looking up, like, and they're like counting math, and they're not like counting objectives because they're just like they're counting back the endless spells and like the movement. Oh man, This is great. All right, so next, yeah.
This list holds a near and dear place to my heart, but it definitely is the most probably theoretical of the lists.
So this one here that I just pulled up, the Stormcast list.
So this list I actually took to Holy Wars. Now, the list you see on the screen is not good. So everyone just ignore everything past the hero section, okay? I realized later on after I wrote this up, I was like, that doesn't work anymore at all. So ignore everything from the units part down.
Okay. All right, so this is... Yeah, go ahead.
So let me walk you through the key things here. So what got me started on this was the Sword of Judgment, which we've all heard of this artifact. It from Ulgu. You replace it's a melee weapon, a 6 to hit against, I think, heroes and monsters, does d6 mortal wounds. And it's a modified 6 to hit. So it's still that janky older wording. You can still do some things with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, one of the fun parts of Stormcast are that since you're playing that more elite army, you can get a little bit more attached to the individual heroes. So is there a way to like make a hero squad essentially? And what's the crux of that? Another way of thinking of this in the game Dominions, they have what are called thugs. These are, hero characters who normally are pretty good, but through the right combination of spells and equipment, they can actually fight armies on their own. And so my thought was, how do I make a thug in Stormcast, essentially?
Right on. And real quick, I love the title of this one again. So you were joking before it starts with the title, but I think these titles are really well thought out. Maybe it doesn't start there, but by the time you land on it. So this one is Allegiant Stormcast Eternals. And the name is Screw AoS, I Want to Play an RPG. I like this. And Javi Bear says, this list looks too normal. I'm scared.
So, probably the one that no one has ever heard of, because the Stormcast love to name all of their models very similar things, is the Knight Zephyros, who is basically the generic version of Knave Black Talon. So the Knight Zephyros has 6 melee attacks with their melee weapon. 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1. So on the surface, like, that's okay. It's probably nothing to write home about. But if she makes a charge, she gets an additional attack added to that. So now we're at 7 attacks with this melee weapon. Okay, pretty good. So then, what else can we do? If we give her the Sword of Judgment, we now have got 7 attacks that potentially trigger this Sword of Judgment a proc. So, all right, well, we put Gav in there to guarantee that charge, because now we can use command points to just drop her out of the sky, and since she's Hammer of Sigmar, just keep adding 3 inches to her charge distance. So now we can actually get her in on a target.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what else can we do? Well, the Lord Celestin on foot has a command ability that's +1 to hit with melee attacks. And remember, the Sword of Judgment is a modified 6 to hit.
Right.
So now we can toss command points at that. A Knight Azeros lets you reroll 1s to hit as long as the target is within 10 inches of the Knight Azeros. So now we're tossing command points at it, and this is where the older version is a little better, because you can just buy command points.
Right.
We're dropping a hero in, we're guaranteeing her charge, potentially getting her to be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, and every 2-up against the hero we're targeting is d6 mortal wounds.
It's a 2. Oh man.
Yeah. So I took this to Holy Wars and I played against I think Jake was one of my first games. I think it was him. I might be misremembering. And I definitely was not going to win the match. But in about, I think, turn 2, he had a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, was his general. He had all these great buffs, all these good things going for him. But there just happened to be enough space to drop a Knight Zephyros 9 inches away. And then she did 27 mortal wounds to him.
I like that.
My idea is the heroes drop in, they kill the target, and then you have a fun minigame of them having to literally fight their way out of the enemy army. The rest of your army does whatever, but those 4 heroes are now fighting their way out from behind enemy lines after killing the target.
Yeah, it's totally a D&D party. Like, it's just... it's like the party of... Oh, man.
We killed the big bad, his army is now turning on us for vengeance, and we're just gonna cut our way through or not.
I like it because it's got a little bit of the casino vibe too. Like when your command points, you're just using poker checks, and you throw them into the center of the table, and you're like, I'm all in, and you're just gonna try to do the combo. So I love that. That's one of my great laments of to the change to orcs. I think they were like the last army that got that like casino like vibe to the command points. So this is fun. Oh,
yeah. How I think you would actually make this work. You'd put in Cleansing Phalanx, because that's probably the cheapest battalion that actually gets you that extra artifact, which you need for Hammers of Sigmar.
Right.
You buy a command point. Yeah, I would love to have the Aether Quartz brooch in it, but I don't. There's just no way to fit it. There's no way to get it in there. You could potentially swap this for Tempest Lords, but then you lose Gav being able to give you the plus 3-inch charge. So this list probably doesn't work as well anymore, but of course, you could run something like this.
It comes back to the question. Like, you've got the question, and then from there, it's just test until you refine it down. You've already got, like, asked the right question, or the wrong question, depending on where you come down on wacky lists. Yeah, the closest thing I have to this is my Chaos Gargant list I did for Beasts of Chaos, where I realized that, like, its headbutt was actually, like, really good.
Right, yeah, it is actually really good. It's like D6 wounds, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I found out that I could go, like, they naturally can add attacks, and then you can Titanic Fury them. And as long as you have somebody, like, running along, feeding them a command point, like, I put it in, as long as you have someone, like, chasing after them, like, feeding them command points to, like, reroll their charges so they don't fall down, you just, like, become the quad headbutt man.
Right, yeah. And maybe you put it in Gave Spawn and you just keep that one little Chaos Spawn right behind the Giants, and when they get in there, it's just like, and you have an attack, and you have an attack, and you have an attack.
All of the headbutts. Well, see, Gave Spawn is one of the last stacking ones. So you can, like, actually casino the command points with the Gave Spawn. So you can, like, just have all of the headbutts.
You can, but it requires you to keep a 5-wound model with a 5-up save alive with 2d6 random movement long enough to actually get near the front lines.
Or summon one on.
You can summon them on. That is true. You can.
Yeah. So, like, you just have people, like, you just have the barbecue shaman just, like, lobbing Ungors into the furnace, and then, like, and then Chaos Spawns just, like, popping into existence on the peripherals of the table, and just that one Gargant with, like, the Great Brace Shaman, like, hup behind him. You know what? It might as well be Grashrak for the +1 negative. So you have Grashrak just, like, hup, like, right behind him, so that he can, like, move properly, and feed him a command point if he needs to, for rerolling his charges to get in for the headbutts. Like, so you just have that happening, and then you're trying to blink in a Chaos Spawn in the right position. And once the Gargant's in position to fight, you just suicide the Shaman. He becomes a Chaos Spawn.
Oh, that's right.
In the combat phase. And then you actually, like, choose to activate, like, last, sacrifice the guy, and then just headbutt everything. So
how dare you kill my friend? I will headbutt you into the earth.
What about the worthless Sylvaneth ally battalion of 3 Spite Revs and Outcasts? Less than 400 total.
I'm sure there is a way you can make a version of this list work. It's not like the entire idea. The key parts of the combo are the Knight Zephyros with the Sword of Judgment, and then the Lord Celestant pumping that +1 to hit. So as long as you get them in, the combo still works. So I'm sure there's different flavors of it you can make happen.
Right on. All right, so then this next one, we've got a little bit of a dual list here.
Yeah, we'll skip the Star Drake one.
Did we skip the Star Drake one? Stormcast Eternals, Ulgu. I don't think I have the Star Drake one.
That one, for some reason, might not have formatted right, but I can very quickly take you.
I've got the Hallowheart one. Yeah, right.
The Star Drake one is another Stormcast list. I can very quickly take.
Okay, take us through that one.
So I was looking over the War Scroll for the Lord Celestin on Star Drake, and again, this is often the method. I look over War Scroll and I'm like, hey, that's an interesting little line in there.
Yeah. So
he has a shield. And I think all of the Lord Celestins that have the shield have this ability where it lets them re-roll. I'm actually just going to pull it up quickly. I believe they get to re-roll saves of 1. Sigmarite Thunder Shield. You can re-roll saves of 1 for attacks that target the model. And if the re-rolled save is successful, each enemy unit within 3 inches suffers a mortal wound. So I looked at that and was like, oh, okay, that's a pretty nice ability. And then in the new Stormcast tome, they got the spell Azerite Halo. So if you roll a 6 on your save unmodified, you deal a mortal wound back to the enemy unit. So, okay, that's some interesting stuff. And then Malign Sorcery comes around again and gives the Smoldering Helm, where every 6 up to save modified does a mortal wound to the enemy unit. And you know who's really good at stacking plus to save? Stormcast. And I ran this list at, I think, the last LodgeCon, not the most recent one, but the one before it. And back then we had the old Sisters of the Thorn, and their spell was a friendly unit gets to reroll its saves, and on a 6-up, you deal a mortal wound back to the enemy unit. So I did some quick math, and basically by stacking all of those things onto this one model, along with the Castellant Banner and Staunch Defender, you could basically slide him in against an enemy unit, force them to fight you, and kill them with their own attacks, while taking practically no damage in response.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what I found was, actually, I didn't wind up doing that much damage to the enemy. And on top of that, people are pretty good at not fighting the one big thing that kills them back. So that list turned out to be problematic. Until Hallowheart and Crematorians came around. And then we get into our team list.
All right, so you have this concept that comes to your team list. All right, so this is your team list. You actually intend on running this one, don't you? You and...
At some point, I think Kyle and I want to run this.
Okay, cool. All right, so take me through the Hallowheart place first. I like the names once more. So we got Flint and Tinder. Flint being the Cities of Sigmar Hallowheart half, the 990 points half. And then Tinder being the Crematorians Ossiarch Bone Reapers 990 point half. So
yeah, and don't pan me too hard for the OBR side of this, but I actually wrote it, not Kyle. So he or you, I'm sure, could write probably a better version of this list. But this was...
Crematorians is pretty straightforward. Go ahead.
So the idea here was that same concept of how do I make a unit that the enemy has to deal with, but actually hurts them back for trying to do it? Similar idea to like Plague Monks, essentially. If you leave the Plague Monks alone, they'll kill you. But if you kill them, they kill you. So how can I potentially do that in a double setting where now we get weird interactions between armies that don't usually get to interact with one another?
Right.
So the Hallowheart side of this is based around one key spell, which is Warding Brand. So Warding Brand is you pick a friendly unit, and then whenever they take a wound, I think on a 5-up, they deal a mortal wound back to the enemy.
So importantly, Warding Brand dodges any keyword bingo. It just says
Correct.
allied unit.
Warding Brand just says friendly unit.
And then TOs are...
A 4-up, actually, it bounces that mortal wound back. So it has to be in melee, but on a 4-up, you deal a mortal wound back to the enemy.
Yeah, some TOs won't allow you to cast spells crosswise, but very technically speaking, your teammate is a friendly... their units are friendly to you. So
yeah, the Coalition of Death rules, at least how they were, I haven't looked at them recently, but the way it was written said that if you are doing a setup like this, like a doubles or a team where you've got different types of armies together that normally aren't, they are all considered to be one unified army, even if there are multiple players running it.
Right.
So therefore, if it's all one army, then your Mortek Guard are friendly.
Right. So this is a 4-up good spell.
Yeah, so I get to put this on a unit of, say, 40 more tech guard. Now they get on a whenever you deal a wound to me in melee, on a 4-up I get to bounce a mortal wound back to you.
Right.
And then on top of that, we get all of the other spells from Hallow. So we get stuff like Crystal Aegis. So, actually, and I think Crystal Aegis doesn't work on... Yeah, so that only is for the Hallowheart specific ability to ignore spells. So it's not going to work on your allies here. But since we're Hallowheart, and since we've got a sorceress on Black Dragon to eat those wounds, we can get that plus D6 to cast on the sorceress, who already gets plus 2 to cast by knifing a guy. So we're getting plus D6 plus 2 to cast that Warding Brand. So it's going off, considering it casts on a 6.
Yeah.
So we're getting that on that unit of Mortec Guard pretty consistently. We're also giving them an empowered Emerald Life Swarm. So now we're getting an additional D6 Mortec Guard back. And you know how you were complaining about them being slow?
Project power, yeah. The projection of power is an issue for Ossiarch Bone Reapers, unless...
You have an empowered Soulscream Bridge.
And the base for the Harvester should be within that 6 inches, so the Harvester gets to follow them too.
Yeah, you would hope. So you might have to do some practice on how do I actually...
Yeah.
But if you do, and you potentially keep this whole group alive, then you're getting some really good spell support from a Hallowheart list onto a really tough block in the Mortec Guard.
Yeah, and then just a real quick... I mean, the shards and stuff in your list, the units, once more, it's like the units almost don't matter here. Like the Dark Shards and Blackguards, they're just... You play Dark Elves, so...
The Blackguard are there because I love them. The Dark Shards are there because, actually, Hallowheart has a spell to give you +1 to wound.
Mm-hmm.
And so 30 Dark Shards with that buff, with the buffs on their War Scroll, are putting out 60 shots that actually are fairly accurate. They're not super long range, and they don't have any rend, but you can just drown the target in shots that way, and Hallowheart actually makes it a little easier to do that.
Yeah,
so they're not a bad little shooting block.
Yeah, they're not a bad little shooting block. And I mean, they're gonna hero snipe. Like they're gonna take down any problematic heroes. Some counter shooting, which is something that the Bone Daddies don't have themselves. If you're not running your Mortec crawlers, which you usually when you're going the regen build, you have to choose either crawlers or harvesters. And since you're doing crematorians, you're pretty much locked in on having a harvester, so that you get that not even hero phase regen, you get the real time regen, which is just a problem. For
sure. Yeah, and the Dark Shards being in there creates just one of those annoying challenges for an opponent where they don't want to have to kill Dark Shards because generally they're not great. But now you've made them actually pretty okay, so now the opponent has to dedicate resources to killing Dark Shards, and that just does not feel good.
Right. And meanwhile, they have 440 points, well, basically 640 points of, roided up, Ossiarch Bone Reapers, marching towards them across a bridge. And you're just gonna... I would almost even spread that out, just, stretch it out just a touch. But you can't spread out your Mortec Guard that much if you want to keep the Hecatos buff. Unless you have a hero travel with them. So you're just going to, spread that out just a touch and just, push that into somebody's grill and say, here, hold all these wounds for me.
Right. Yeah. And by having this big of a unit, 40, I'm sure, is an unwieldy number of Mortec. But by making them that big with that buff, it's just a lot of space that someone has to deal with, because if you're in range of them, you have to attack them, which potentially triggers Warding Brand.
Right.
And if you kill them, then you get to deal with crematorians as well.
Yeah, then they blow up within 3 inches. The thing, you still have... They still... The other part of this, the most important part of this is, it's not a single model. So what happens is they have to fight, but they don't have to take their full pile into an advent and into a to get maximum frontage to fight you back. So that your opponent has to balance. I don't want to fully pile in because I'm gonna get hurt with all my extra frontage. But if I don't, 40 Mortec Guard are just gonna swarm in and kill you as well. So at some point, you're having to make the decision, two bad decisions, And anytime you're giving opponents 2 bad decisions in Age of Sigmar, you're pretty much winning.
For sure. Where the 40 Mortek guards do a lot better than my Star Drake is that it's a much bigger area. They've got a lot of killing power in and of themselves, and it's going to be pretty hard to ignore them because they can spread thin or they can concentrate.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. No, this is cool. The other thing is, just real quick about like 1K, you said 40 is probably unwieldy or it's too much. The thing is at 1K, everyone's scaled down, and so things that deal with 440 points of Mortek Guard are a bigger tax for someone else's army, and they're also like less prevalent. People have to scale down their good stuff, whatever they're doing. You know, you're not running 9 heals anymore. You're running 6 heals or some MSU of 3s. You know, so the answers there begin to thin out, which is, I mean, one of the things I was noticing with Mortek Guard in general is I just want 30 blocks and not 20s. Like, 20s die a lot. 30s, that extra 10 bodies, and with such an all-in plan with this list, and not an all-in plan in terms of like it's the only thing you do, because you do have your dark shards doing a threat, and I think you got some spell dominance too. But you're so all in on this plan that it's like you might as well just buy the extra 10 bodies of insurance, the extra 10 bodies to make sure the unit doesn't get wiped. That's just more bodies to explode at the end of the day, to then regen and fully like just become a white blood cell attacking the disease and just slowly swarm around things and like kill yourself and kill them to win. It's great. I like this too. I think this isn't even a bad list for teams, for doubles.
No, I think this list potentially has some legs. The downside is anytime you build a list that relies on your opponent doing something to you, then that's always going to be a bit finicky because your opponent is probably going to choose not to do the thing.
Right.
So you have to make it so there's enough other threats in there that you're forcing them to make a choice. Do I go and fight that 40 block of guard that I really don't want to be anywhere near? Can I afford to not deal with them? Yeah. Do I have enough tools to deal with them? And what am I potentially sacrificing somewhere else in order to do that?
Yeah. I mean, and that's where the battle plan can help or hurt you too. If you're like, if it's, you know, something like Duality of Death, like you've got 40 Mortek guards sitting there, like it's kind of over, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like whereas something like Scorched Earth, 140 block of trying to like chase around the map, you know, it's less of a beat stick, but it's still one of those awesome "can I do this" questions being answered, and then just cranking it all the way to 11. So I approve.
Yeah, for sure. This was definitely a follow-up of this was me roping Kyle into my desire to make things deal damage for dealing damage to me.
Have you tried to do something similar with Plague Monks yet? Because I feel like there's
Plague Monks are the obvious choice, but I haven't because they're filthy and disgusting.
Is that... And there's not really, like, they don't have a ton of other gas. The fact that they explode after you kill them is kind of like a bonus, right?
Right. Yeah, and certainly, you know, Plague Monks are probably the ones who actually do this concept correctly.
Because of double pylons.
Right, yeah. And I'm just not interested in playing anything Nurgle or Pestilence related. So that's why I haven't really put together that list. Yeah. But one of the nice things about something like this, some way that you can do that in another area that's more interesting, is if you put Archaon into any list, whenever anyone uses a command point, he potentially gives Fight When You Die to himself. So then you've got double attacking Archaon.
Right. Yeah, but Plague Monks aren't skeletons, thus making them inferior. I agree, Frank. I agree
too. Yeah.
Skeletons are sweet. Also, for me, there's something quintessential about crematorians in that, like, I still think, in many ways, Diablo 2 Necromancer is just the most death it will ever get for anything. Like, yeah, there are other death things that existed beforehand, you know, but, like, when it gets right down to it, like, Corpse Explosion is just...
Right, yeah.
It's one of those quintessentially death things to me, and basically you're making a Corpse Explosion factory whenever you make crematorians, and I fucking love it. I actually think that Crematorians is going to end up being like one of the real winners when all the chips fall where they may, with like, you know, like 7 months from now, like, because the Crematorians players are just going to be having a blast, literally. So like, it's like Crematorians and Staliarch Lords players are just like, woo, because Staliarch Lords are like turning on the washing machine and just like throwing you in the spin cycle, and then like, and Crematorians, so you have Staliarch Lords that are just like Sanic, they gotta go fast, and like there's a joy in just like hanging your head out the window and like and you know, blazing it, but then, you know, on the other hand, Crematorians are corpse factories. They're also blazing it because they're exploding and they're on fire. Like,
Yeah.
Crematorians is where I would actually take my where I would actually take the Umbral Spell Portal lunchbox tech. So that I can project that splody unit someplace. Even if it's just like a 20 block, and then you have the main ground and pound, like 40 block with a harvester, probably more realistically like a 30 block with a harvester to make the points work. That's probably where I would take that combo, is to basically like like teleport like the whole unit into somebody's face.
Right. Yeah, I think especially if we see something similar with OBR that we with Tzeentch or with Slaanesh, where eventually a bigger overhaul comes in and say, okay, Petrifex is problematic, let's make a tweak here.
Yeah.
Same with, you know, Tzeentch with Host Duplicitous or with Eternal Conflagration. Then, of course, all of those other sub-factions are like, great! You know, we clearly weren't attracting a lot of attention, so now we get to send out our Mortec to go blow up in people's faces. We get to have our Death Riders running roughshod all over the place.
Yeah.
And somewhere, a no Myriad player is walking away like, yeah, that game was really fast. The guy just brought 20 endless spells.
I think that's a perfect place to end it. Do you have any digital soapbox moments you'd like to get out the way? Anything you want to put on blast before we sign out here?
As always, my gratitude to Kyle and Christian, other Pants Mafia members, for having to put up with these lists being built into, you know, the chat that we have, and being like, Alex, no, please don't, not again. So gratitude to them as well, and yeah, I think that's the key thing. I think the takeaway I hope people get from this, I hope they had a good time listening, and I hope this inspires you to go and just, you know, look back over your War Scrolls and see if there are any kind of fun, weird interactions like this that you'd want to try to put on the table and just see how they work, have a laugh with them.
Yeah, like just stop asking, should I do this? Start asking, can I do this? And have some fun. I like what Druma said here, that you can actually, in Cities, the Umbral Spell Portal lunchbox combo is infinite, because you can put the Umbral Spell Portal anyway when you exploit that weird transaction. So like now the 40 block of card, whelm, like they're on the other, like completely diagonal away. Like, great.
It's okay. They're not going to be anywhere near us. Oh shit, they're here. They're here.
Like, you can't screen enough table.
They brought a boat. I thought only the fish elves brought the boat.
Yeah, that's great. All right, man. Thank you so much for being on the another episode of RantCast. I hope to have you back on pretty soon.
Of course.
Chat gang, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight, having a laugh with us, enjoying some of Alex's wacky lists. We'll be back to our usual WAAC scheduled programming later. And chat gang, you're the show within the show. I saw you were real active on some topics, so thank you so much for being here, as always, supporting me. And we will catch you next week. It's going to be Bryce. It's going to be an Alpha-sode, The Revenge.
Malarian's the best. High up suck.